HIPAA custom forms. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at custom forms and some of the different kind of implementation styles, some of the different integrations, and just briefly mentioning some of the different considerations for security and privacy as well. Okay, let's get into it. Okay, so in this first example of custom forms, we're going to be taking a look at more of a workflow that is built around a robust form that is going to be used for covered entities that this particular organization is helping to prepare for being able to get Medicare and Medicaid access. So in this particular case, they can see this internal group of team members can see the different forms and ratings, and they can drill into this data. And then here you can see this is a kind of custom form where they're going to be able to intake the data. So I want to manually import, manually input, or I want to import my results. And then they can download a template if they do want to do that. Then they can come in and look at the particular data points if they have brought them in using an import. And then here you can see that we're going to be going in and just kind of looking at some of the different sections. Kind of the main point here is that for each of these items, they can provide details as to why something happened, maybe why there was an issue, that kind of a thing. They can also come in and do editing on the form itself, doing a manual input model. So this model here is more of a bulk import the data and then go edit the data points by selecting the records and then making changes to those records. And then this format would be a manual input format. So here we can bring in all of the data. We can actually see detailed information about what the responses were. So the totals, we can select basically the different results from the different sections of these kind of surveys. And here you can just see some examples of what those might be with these questions in the form. So how are we doing? Are we going to be able to deliver on certain objectives? If not, are we going to request an exclusion? And then, a whole workflow to go with that with requesting an exclusion. So here you can see someone is going in and they're actually filling out this detailed process of the form itself. And you can see what they're getting are all of the questions and then their answers. But they also have essentially a status bar to show them how far along in the process they are. Here you can see that this is now completed. And they have the ability to, based on the answers to the questions, to provide different response types. So here they're getting a notes field whenever they say partially. And again, you can see that they've answered all the questions and now they're showing completed in this kind of percent completion. For some forms, they can be quite long. And whether you're working with patients where you're having them fill out forms or healthcare providers or another healthcare organization, you probably do want to be able to allow them to be able to see how much is left and make sure that whenever you're asking the questions, the form itself can be dynamic enough that it can change based on the answers and possibly even trigger different workflows. So if they say no to something that's really important, and this is about covered entity and being HIPAA compliant, we may then want to trigger an alert to the appropriate person so they can get in touch with this covered entity and help them make sure that they are covered, make sure that they resolve any of the issues, for example. So then once the form is submitted, the user can see a status. So this would show a satisfactory status. This would show an unsatisfactory or needs work, and then suggested next steps. So the idea here is that this is a dynamic process the user is going through, and they're going to be able to get this kind of interactive kind of self-service within the form itself to really drive as much behavior and optimization as possible without having to have someone else interacting with them. Of course, depending on their answers, we're going to have someone interact with them for the certain specific areas where it applies. But if everything works out, self-service, they're done, they can go on to the next activity. If there are any issues or areas for remediation, then basically they see these kind of suggested next steps, and it's very guided and opinionated instead of being very general and generic. Okay, let's take a look at another example now. Okay, so in this next example, we're going to be taking a look at a checkout form. And in this particular case, this form is really specifically going to be getting prerequisite information and symptoms, and basically just making sure that the patient is filling all of this necessary data out before a telehealth appointment. So this is pretty simple, but the main thing we want you to take away is that during the process, we're kind of showing them what the status is. We're trying to keep the questions to as few as possible. So we can integrate with a back office EMR, EHR, pharmacy application, really lab result application, etc. We can integrate with any of those. We've done it many, many times. And ultimately, what you're seeing here is just the fields that the patient actually needs to fill out in order to feed into that set of integrations. Okay, so this particular user needs to fill all of this information out. And then once they have, they're also filling out information here. And you can see there's additional PHI information here. And then they're going to be able to sign off and give a consent. Now, what's really interesting about this is this kind of set of custom forms is during a checkout process, but we are able to integrate this HIPAA data securely, and we can tokenize the data so that it's not really in the e-commerce system. And it just kind of depends on your implementation that you prefer. Do you want to use your existing e-commerce system or existing portal system and basically separate out PHI data using tokenization? Or do you want to have that integrated and make the whole platform very robust and HIPAA compliant? It's up to you, but one of the options you can consider is having a section or forms be integrated, but the data never making it into the system that you've integrated those forms into. If you're interested in that, let us know. We certainly are happy to help and provide additional details around how you can accomplish that without having to rip and replace what infrastructure you already have. Now, in this next example, this is a form where this is a candidate for a potential candidate for basically a neck, a component used for back spinal surgery, excuse me. And basically, we're just going through and asking simple questions. And here you can see the actual device that would go in and basically it looks like replace part of the spinal cord here. And so this person, based on the questions that they answered, and they're pretty simple, but you can see it's a very immersive process. So they've got nice visuals, they've got nice explanations, and then if they answer in a certain way, then they are considered a candidate. So then we provide them with next steps where they can find a surgeon, send an email, or do a PDF download. They could also not be a candidate, most likely, and then they could kind of talk with a care physician or a doctor and be able to kind of find out why they wouldn't be a good fit and what some other options might be. So this is an example of a form that is kind of helping the user to go through and just kind of assess whether or not they're a good fit for something. There are all kinds of applications for HIPAA forms. Really, the list goes on. It can be quite detailed with regards to workflows and notifications and kind of triggering from one entity to another. For example, being able to coordinate resources across, patient care, primary care, maybe secondary care, maybe inventory and resources that need to support a upcoming procedure, possibly any kind of follow-up that needs to go along with the form. And again, we're always happy to help with this. If you have a project that has a relatively custom HIPAA form, or you're trying to figure out how to embed a HIPAA form into your existing infrastructure without violating HIPAA, then we recommend talking with an expert who has done this before and can help you at least kind of think about how the rules are written, what they say, and how to implement them and respect and hopefully go above and beyond what the HIPAA compliance rules state in order to be compliant with those rules. Okay, so next we'll just kind of briefly talk about how we can potentially help you with engaging going forward. Thanks for making it to the end of this video. If you would, we encourage you to consider the opportunity to take advantage of our complimentary discovery process. If you're really interested in getting more information about this particular topic, that is a great way to, in a no hassle, kind of low key way, get to interact with experts within this field. And our commitment to you, if you decide to engage our team for a complimentary discovery or just a complimentary strategy and discussion, is that we will absolutely point you in a positive direction, help you kind of accelerate on your path, even if there's not a good fit for us to directly work together. We have a lot of resources and a lot of experience in this area of focus, and we just encourage you to take advantage of that if you're seriously looking in this space. Uh, if there is a good fit, of course, we'll also present you with great options that you can consider for how we might work together. And either way, we certainly appreciate you taking a look at this video. We encourage you, if you think this was valuable, to hit the like button. And if you'd like to see more of these videos, go ahead and hit subscribe. And we will look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.